19-year-old captured Pakistani terrorist has exposed Pakistan Army and their entire ploy to push terror across the border yet again. Captured Pakistani terrorist has said that he was trained to shoot by the Pakistani Army and he had surrendered to the Indian forces during the counter-infiltration URI Operation that the Army carried out in Jammu and Kashmir. Remember that went on for almost a week. Initially, there were 6 terrorists who attempted to infiltrate. 2 of them managed to come to our territory but got holed up as our forces surrounded them, and those operations went on for several days. 1 was shot dead, the other one captured alive. And it is him who has now come up and admitted and given details of ISI's role, Pakistani Army's role, how they were brainwashed, how they were trained, and what they were sent to do across the border to our country. There is an excerpt of that.
उसने मुझे 20,000 रुपये में घर भेज दिया। उसके बाद मुझे उसने आई से हवाले किया। आई से ही मुझे पाकिस्तान आर्मी का ट्रेनिंग सेंटर वो मास्टर था गाड़ी बिजला के पास है, उधर मुझे ट्रेनिंग दी। पाकिस्तान आर्मी के 250 रुपये था। उसने ट्रेनिंग दी। ट्रेनिंग के नाम में एक को जो फायर करें फायर RTD फायर में कैसे करता ट्रेनिंग का ट्रेनिंग किया। और हमारा 9 लड़के थे, 9 लड़कों की फोटो भी मशवरा को एरिया मान का फॉलो कर आपको मार उसको उसकी तस्वीर साइन की। तस्वीर साइन करने के बाद उन्होंने मुझे सेलेक्ट किया।
But that was an excerpt of what he said. In a sense, if I just take you through the top highlights of this 19-year-old boy and what he has claimed. He was sent to India by the LET, ISI and Pak Army. These 3 together brainwashed them, told them lies about Kashmir, spread lies about Kashmir. They were told that the Indian Army is carrying out a bloodbath. And then Enas was recruiting people for the LET. He underwent weapons training with the Pakistani Army and the ISI. Instructors were employed who were Pakistani Army personnel who were employed to train them. False and fake narrative of Islam indoctrinated during the training, and that we were instructed to reach Patan. We were instructed to wait for a next set of orders. They were supposed to get their arms and ammunition at Patan. It was an elaborate plan to strike, to target India inside our borders, on our territory, and carry out strikes, but they were caught instead. Now, I want to look at the larger picture. This is not just a conversation about Pakistan and Pakistan's terror ploys, but I want to look at a larger picture where now we are staring at challenges on both sides and active challenges on both sides constantly. On the Pakistani side, they continue to try and push through terrorists. Constant reports of attempts for infiltration bids that get foiled come in, especially before the onset of the winter season. This is the time when it happens, and that's what we're witnessing. Along with this, repeated ceasefire violations, though they may have gone down in comparison to 4 years ago, but it's still on. The new challenge is the repeated sighting of drones and Pakistani drones, them dropping bombs via these drones, which has become a big challenge. On the other side is Pakistan's friend, China. Multiple transgressions deep into the Indian territory, not just in Ladakh, but now also in Uttarakhand. The challenge not just in the northern border, but also along our northeast border. China is constantly pushing along, also building heavy infrastructure and deploying heavy military personnel along the LAC, all across. It's not one specific region. They're even installing new airfields in Tibet now. So the conversation that we're going to have tonight is, what should India's strategy be? What it is already, some of it is in implementation mode, a lot more may need to be done. But how do you tackle a dual front challenge where you have two constantly provocative neighbors whose only idea is to push through terrorism and grab our land, expansionism? I say good evening to Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma joining me this evening, Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia also with us this evening, Sushant Sareen, Strategic Affairs Expert, Senior Fellow at ORF, and Maruf Raza, Strategic Affairs Expert, also joining us this evening. Let me start off with General Vinod Bhatia and ask him his view. General Bhatia, we've actually seen a lot of what the Army seems to be doing in the last couple of years in terms of raising fresh divisions, additional troop deployment, even the infrastructure push does show that there is an understanding and a movement towards a dual front challenge. But how much more and what do you think we need to focus on at the government level and then military level?
I think military and government are together in this, and they are aware of what is required to be done. We need to build military capabilities. China restricts strength, and we have to build military capability to ensure peace and deter China's aggressive behavior. This has been going on for some time. I think after Xi Jinping became the president on 14th of March 2013, we saw the first translation in Depsang on 14th April 2013, within a month of his taking over the president. And thereafter, we've seen it again in 2014 September, and then in Doklam, and now this forward deployment of the PLA all along the LAC in eastern Ladakh in 4-5 places, and also Nakul in other places. I think this is going to continue. The LAC is a line of perceptions. So China does take advantage of the line of perceptions. And if we do not build capabilities, I think we'll always be on the reacting and receiving end. So we have built capabilities. We have the acquisition forces, which is generally colloquially called the Mountain Strike Force. This was sanctioned in 2013. Unfortunately, because of the ongoing dialogue with China, we did not pay much attention to it. But now the Mountain Strike Force has been completed, so we have the strength militarily. We also look at multi-domain aspects of things. But what we really need to do is, we talk about collusive threat between Pakistan and China. I think we should be looking at a collaborative threat, which is, there is a certain difference in a collusive threat and a collaborative threat. We should be looking at a collaborative threat. We also need to strategy with Pakistan and with China and make sure that we meet and mitigate these threats. Just to give this thing, with China, I think we need a 3D strategy. Defend along the line of actual control, dominate the seas, and deter China's aggressiveness with, bind to balance with like-minded nations like the Quad and things like that. And also, we need to make sure that with Pakistan, especially now what has happened in Afghanistan thereafter, we're going to see more and more of terrorism. What we need to do with Pakistan is follow a 3P strategy. We need to be preemptive, we need to be proactive, and we need to punitive strikes have to go on. Pakistan has to understand that they cannot cross the red lines because Pakistan, I think, is a more mischievous neighbor, China as an adversary, and what will go on in the line of actual control will continue. We have not seen any escalation after the Galwan incident, which also says that we have stood up to China, and that is why China has not been able to do any escalation whatsoever. But with Pakistan's proxy war, the low-cost, high-effect war, we'll see, I think, more and more of terrorism coming in from across the line of actual control. And like you rightly said, these people have been brainwashed. I was in Punch, and the bus comes from Punch, and when the Pakistan POK residents will come across, and they used to see the development, the medical facilities, the schooling, the freedom, the rights to pray and other things on our side of on India, and they were surprised. They said, we thought that you could not pray out here. They were totally brainwashed as to Kashmir being what you said is a bloodbath, and that they've been told. So I think we also need to correct perceptions among the people across the borders. So that will be very important.
We need to correct the perceptions across the border as one of the big challenges that we will look at, because his story and what this Pakistani terrorist has actually said reveals so much about how easily they're able to pick on, poor youngsters who have no means to earn a livelihood, brainwash them, make them undergo training for a couple of months, and then send them across the border with ideas of what, the horror that India seems to be unfolding on this side, which is why they must play their part. Now, that being said, General Rakesh Sharma, would you like to add to what General Bhatia said about the dual front challenge and what we need to further do?
Thank you, Tanvi, for inviting me. Now, the fact of the matter is China is facing significant internal woes. They have problems on their multi-front internal issues. They have 1 year left for the President Xi to come up with the 20th National Congress to seek his additional time after his two tenures are over. So there is things happening there. The socialism is being pushed up in a very strong way because of the haves and the have-nots and the oligarchs being pushed aside. So when you follow what is happening inside China, there are actually serious anxieties what comes through. And all these push in Taiwan and push in Eastern Ladakh or push in Arunachal Pradesh or South China Sea is all honing in more and more nationalism. There are pop-ups, there are media reports, there are a whole lot of things being pushed across to bring about nationalism. That causes a little bit of anxiety in this manner, that there is an attempt to have socialism and also honing in nationalism. And then you add on to what is being done in Xinjiang and what is being done in Tibet, the super highways, the super fast trains, the Xiokang villages, the 600 odd villages and the 2.5-3 lakh people who are being rehabilitated next to the line of actual control, and the 30 odd airfields being made or length being increased of the runways. Well, there is an issue here that we have to watch out, especially in the course of next 1 year. I won't say that we are moving towards a conventional war, but
yes,
we have to watch out against a strategic surprise of any kind be carried out. It may or may not be on the ground. It may be of any other kind, but there will be an attempt to do something which helps out Chinese hierarchy to show up the best foot forward in their form, so that when they come up to the 20th Congress, they show a kind of indispensability. But the fact of the Pakistani side is different. On the Pakistani side, it is like Kasab playing again. This is Kasab, one more Kasab who's come in, one more dossier, one more information, one more Sialkot, Okra, one more same kind of storytelling which we made dossier, we submitted. So this man which we have caught in Islamabad Nala is like at one time we used to feel it is the national highway of people coming across in this area to URI. So when we did what we did, the fact is that this is an infiltration attempt without firing. Infrastructure exists. That's very important. The ceasefire is holding out, and still infiltration attempts have been carried out in Rajouri, in Poonch, and now in URI. Mm-hmm. There are many issues happening here. So Pakistan front is still manageable. We have to be watchful on what is happening on the Chinese side.
Okay, Pakistan front manageable. It's the same old tactics that they use. We perhaps over the years have also mastered the art of stopping them and putting them in their place. Maruf, would you agree? China is the bigger threat right now, and the various ways and means that they come up with to challenge us.
Yeah, since April-May last year, China has come into our radar screen, and everyone's talking of China as being the bigger threat. True. But China has always been a bigger threat to India. The only fact was that China takes its time to decide its course of action. And as General Sharma has brought out, and before that in great detail, General Bhatia has brought out, there are various issues that the Indian military in particular is conscious of. It's not that they are ill-prepared, they are going to be taken by surprise on any front. Yes, we were taken by surprise on the LAC when the Chinese intrusions took place in April, May last year. But there is a whole issue and a debate about it, which I don't want to get into now. The basic things which I want to bring home is that we must understand that the China-Pakistan nexus is not of yesterday. It's been happening very clearly since 1963 onwards. You see, if you go back, and I always go back to history to try and understand where the problems lie. In the case of China and Pakistan, they had started negotiating before the Sino invasion of India in October 62, and they had negotiated an arrangement by which by March 63, China had access and control of the Shaksgam Valley, which is north of the general area of Kargil and beyond. And what is we call POK, Pakistan calls northern areas, and there are all sorts of names that are given to it, Gilgit, Baltistan, etc., etc. Now, the fact of the matter is that China has a large strategic water-centric agenda. So therefore, it wants control of the entire northern area, starting from Aksai Chin right through what we call POK, and then you go beyond into the areas which runs through Pakistan's so-called Azad Kashmir and then comes into Pakistan's Punjab and beyond. It's basically China's obsession, A, is waters. As long as they have control over the sources of the waters, China is going to be able to reap the benefits of it for its long-term semiconductor, silicon wafer, microchip agenda. That some of us know who have done research on it. And if you go onto the net, you'll find more details on it. The second aspect is that the Chinese are an equal territorial occupant of Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir, which is now Kashmir and Ladakh. And the Chinese have been making huge investments. It's not just the China-Pakistan economic corridor, but it's also investment in dams. They've spent something like $26 billion in about 5 dam projects in all those northern areas to basically accumulate static water, which will then help them to put semiconductors in place and silicon wafers. Now, the Pakistanis have never really grown beyond trying to get themselves a national narrative, which is anything other than an obsession of being anti-Indian. And for the Pakistani military and the politicians in Pakistan, the easiest route to get their people charged up and continue to fund the obscene budgets that the military eats up every year. Hussain Haqqani told me on one of my shows that Pakistan's military wobbles up close to 72% of Pakistan's annual expenditure. The military in Pakistan holds 43% of Pakistan's land. The military in Pakistan is unaudited for all the expenses that it incurs. Every agency that serves the military is also controlled by the military and the Fauji Foundation. So Pakistan's military is not championing the cause of the Kashmiris. They're championing their own economic agenda, which Aisha Siddiqa calls military business or milbus.
Right.
Now, Pakistan's military would continue to keep using these wayward characters, the last being the one who's just been caught, and making them into jihadis. How? Because in every family in the villages in the outer areas of Pakistan, there are 1 or 2 wasters who are in every family. They're suddenly given money, they're given a purpose, they're given encouragement, training to go into India, and if they die in the village town hall, their portrait comes up as a shaheed and all that stuff. So it's a lot better than the guy lying around in the village corners as a junkie.
Right.
And that is what they are also tapping on. And Kasab was one of those examples that we heard so much about after 26/11. But most of them are of this lot. This is not new. This keeps coming up again and again. What upsets me is the inability of the West to do anything beyond give, just assertions that, terrorism should not be used, another country's soil should not be used. That's all crap. Pakistan says these are non-state actors. Then they say that we have everything in control in our state. Then how can non-state actors operate in your soil if you have everything in control? What Pakistan is sucking up to the Chinese for, A, is for the money that comes from the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The Chinese want India to remain focused on Pakistan so that China's agenda of dominating Asia is not contested by India. You have to read Martin Jacques' book, When China Rules the World. It's very clearly built out on there.
Okay.
And China, therefore, finally, one point, Tanvi, that China will continue to unsettle us. Jan Bhatia has brought it out in detail. Jan Sharma has brought it out. There will be surprises. And surprises will come because we feel that like Krishna Menon, we have a bloody legacy in South Block, which believes that we can out-talk the Chinese into anything. And we had that kind of phenomena, which led to this real hit we got on our faces with the 1962 war, because except for a handful of commanders on the ground, nobody at the top believed that China could attack us. Even now, there is this belief that talks can lead to everything. You talk, but you talk from a position of strength. You have to understand Mao Zedong's philosophy that the Tibet is the right palm of China and the 5 fingers China must acquire. That is Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, Arunachal. And they will continue to strive for it, whether it will be the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, whether it will be the party congress. They are not going to settle, and the Chinese have long gestation waiting patience.
Okay.
We are the ones who want instant result in an era of television. We want quick answers. There are no quick answers.
There are no quick answers. I completely agree with you, Maruf. There probably isn't even an answer. If you look historically to any conflict that takes place between two neighbors, it barely has ever gotten resolved. But how do you at least have the upper hand, and how do you ensure that you keep up and you continue with that? So, Sham, that's the question. Militarily, we can keep adding to our deployment there. We can keep strengthening our own infrastructure there to make it easy for our military to be there. Diplomatically, doesn't seem to be working. Economically, we can't really do too much to China, at least. Pakistan doesn't care. So what's the strategy then?
Look, I think we need to rethink our strategy. I think militarily, we're not as bad as people make it out to be, but I think we need to refocus how we are going to, or what are the threats we face from China. So, for example, I'm very glad that Maruf has mentioned it in his inimitable style, that, we keep saying that we will not be surprised, but we invariably end up being surprised. And I think that is, we need to take into account, even earlier I was on a program and there was a very senior general, a man I respect hell of a lot, but this thing that I don't think that there will be a conflagration between India and China. I don't even think we should be saying this. I think we should be preparing for this worst case scenario, even though it might not be something which happens, which is quite likely, but even then, because only then we will not be surprised. So we have to cater for the entire spectrum of surprises that the Chinese can pull upon us. That is one. But more importantly, then how do you counter that? If you see some infrastructure development, some amount of building up of force structures is necessary. You can't do without it. But if you're going to try to match the Chinese on this particular thing, it's going to prove ruinous for us. So you have to rethink how you are going to, if there is some kind of adventurism from the Chinese side, what is your riposte going to be? How are you going to respond to it? Will you respond to it bullet for bullet, or will you do something which actually catches the Chinese by surprise? I don't say I have the answers to it, but you have very top generals and people who've been there, done that, who probably need to start thinking on those lines. Not think in a very, very conventional way, but start thinking in a somewhat unconventional way out of the box. I know it's a cliche, but nevertheless. So that is one part of it. The other part of it, Tanvi, where I disagree with what you're saying, I think diplomatically, we have made major inroads. I think our diplomacy has been fairly effective. This whole Quad thing that we are talking about, our growing closeness to the Americans, all of this is part of that rebalancing, which I think General Bhatia was also speaking about. So it's not as though, we are just sitting back and waiting and watching what is happening. My only thing is that if you're getting into this Quad kind of a business, then this reluctance, this hesitation which we have of not wanting to get into military alliances, perhaps we need to start rethinking that. I don't know what that reluctance is. I know it's easier to talk about getting into military alliances, but it's a lot more complicated when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of it. But even so, I think that is a conversation we need to start having within ourselves and with our partners in the Quad and some of the other countries. That is the second. The third is within South Asia, I think we need to, I wouldn't say, be more assertive, but I think we need to be more proactive within South Asia to stall some of the steps that the Chinese are taking. As far as Pakistan is concerned, look, frankly, in this particular episode, this guy was cannon fodder. This kind of cannon fodder is available by the hundreds of thousands in Pakistan. Please remember that the Pakistanis don't have to do very much to indoctrinate and brainwash these guys. Every day you hear Pakistani television, if you study in a Pakistani school, if you listen to Pakistani politicians, every day you read a newspaper, you are getting brainwashed and you are getting indoctrinated, because there is no alternative viewpoint which comes out in Pakistan. Not anymore, not since the Dim has come into power. It does not happen. And under this hybrid regime of Bajwa, again, Bajwa, Mr. Sidhu might want to go and Jappi and Pappi him. But look, he's a slime ball at the end of the day. And this thing that we have that, oh, we can trust these guys, we can talk to these guys, he's an open-hearted kind of a guy. No, this is all a sham. This is all a show. At the heart of it, they're all damn fanatics. Okay, they are Taliban in uniform, in khaki uniform. Until and unless we've understood that, we cannot move forward. So on Pakistan, I think I see a greater sense of realism when it comes to China, although there's a lot more that can be done out there. But I don't see the same amount of realism when it comes to Pakistan. I see more of a knee-jerk kind of a reaction when it comes to Pakistan, rather than a well thought out, long play kind of a thing on how to, fix the Pakistanis.
Okay.
And that is where I think we lack, because every time a Pakistani, comes up and says a couple of nice, as Dr. Christine Fair says, pleasant lies to us, we get swayed by those pleasant lies. And, then you suddenly see all the toughness, all the, hard line we are taking, then saying, okay, we are the same people, we are brothers, long lost, etc., etc. That is just so brainless, but that is something we do all the time. Even now, you've had these luminaries writing letters on how we should be reaching out and working together with Pakistan and Afghanistan. The jokers don't know that Pakistan's entire policy in Afghanistan was to counter India.
Correct.
And yet these guys, they've been diplomats, senior advisors to Mr. Vajpayee, all sorts of characters. So if this is the kind of realism and or lack of realism and alternate reality that people live in, why are you surprised that we don't really have a very cogent policy on Pakistan?
Okay. So let's break it down now. Two aspects, dual front, yes, but let's talk about dealing with Pakistan, General Bhatia. Does the fact that we've managed to capture one of them alive, who's now speaking and revealing how it really works, does that help in any format? And how do we, on a larger basis, define our strategy to deal with Pakistan long term?
This is a good thing that Tevis has been captured, but this is cannon fodder. He's the lowest of the low in the food cycle. He's been given, whatever, I think the going rate is about 25,000 rupees, and I'm talking of Pakistani rupees, not Indian rupees. That's about half of our rupees. And they get a promise of getting some more once they return. They never return in any case, because the life of a terrorist, once he enters into our territory, is limited to about 30 days to 45 days at best. So I don't think that it's going to matter very much to the Pakistani side, the ISI or the Pakistani Army. But the fact remains that it is a larger signal that has been sent. And the largest signal is that the infiltration attempt took place on the 18th of September, which coincided with the URI attack. It has taken place generally in the general area of where the earlier infiltration taken place 5 years ago. So I think that this is more important. And what is also more important is that Pakistan will continue to ensure upping the ante in Jammu and Kashmir, because in Kashmir especially, because the violence levels in Kashmir have definitely gone down post 5th August 2019. Nothing much more otherwise. Violence levels are low. The people are coming out. The silent majority is there, which is for saying peace. Unfortunately, peace dividend has not really been seen by the people because of the first the COVID-19 and thereafter the things have continued bad. So the economic development really has not really taken place. So what I really see out there is the Pakistan attempt will be there in the next month and a half till the snow set in. And these attempts will be to make sure that more and more people are pushed across. And even if these are, they're neutralized in doesn't really matter Pakistan. Even the terrorists have realized this, and what they normally do is a number of them, they just come across the line of control for what, a few meters, 50 odd meters. They fire, they get fired back, and they go back saying that the Indian army is very strong out there, being fired upon. So this is a game which Pakistan is playing, which will continue to keep playing. They will succeed sometimes, definitely, because no counter-infiltration grid cannot be, foolproof. It can get breached. But we have a very effective counter-infiltration grid, and let me assure you that it will be effective. And whatever the Pakistanis may feel, and they want to get the Afghanis possibly in a later time frame, we are very well prepared to meet this threat and to neutralize the terrorists from entering our territory.
Yes, fair enough. Completely agree with you. I don't think there are any doubts about the capabilities that our military has, but it's just if the challenge is constantly getting bigger and bigger, and if we need to find another strategy to deal with it. That's as far as Pakistan is concerned. Let's talk about China now, and General Sharma, to you this question. Last year what we saw, we are still in the process of, fixing that completely. We are still in a last leg of our disengagement. A report has just come yesterday, and we discussed this yesterday on our show about the large levels transgression that happened in Uttarakhand. Again, not a new location for these instances, but for 100 of them to actually come so deep into our territory and go back. Now, what does that mean for us? Do we just continuously deploy lot more of military personnel and equipment all along this LAC?
Tanvi, the fact of the matter is that the line of actual control, as it was decided in 1993, is incurably flawed. It is a wrong way of protecting a border. This is not way it can be done, where the Chinese, and there is always a problem of which exactly is a border, and everybody tries to transgress it. What the Chinese have done in the course of last 6 to 8 months is to make sure that there is no fisticuffs happening, no scuffles happening. They created gaps in between, so they have protected themselves and actually willy-nilly denied us the patrolling rights to this area. Now, what has happened in Barahuti happens every year nearly. At the same time of the year, once or twice they come in, maybe sometime they land up in a place called Parvati Kund, which they haven't done this time, but they do that also, and it also makes a lot of noise. Now, the issue is that the Chinese are sitting pretty in these areas. We have to make sure that they are denied the same things in other areas which are contentious in nature. For example, Rakula. Now, the issue is that you are rightly saying that we have maybe over-deployed and we've got a large number of troops, but then there is no way out of it.
Yes.
Till the time we actually join the action and sort out issues in a more forceful manner, we have to deny it. So it is deterrence by denial. It's a method of doing it. We have to make sure that he is not able to come to Barahuti. I would say that since Barahuti is a perpetual place, let's change the ITBP. Why have ITBP there? Move the Indian Army there, soldiers there, the troops there. Why not, if it is being done in Eastern Ladakh, been done in Arunachal Pradesh, it's been done in Sikkim, why Barahuti alone is not being reinforced by the armed forces? We've got 100 horses, sometimes we notice large number of horses in Eastern Ladakh also, and there were actually problems in combating them. Horses were pushed down the cliffs. So, the fact is, if this is the way this has been done, we have to contest in an equal manner. That's one part of the story. Other is that we have to get involved into Tibet. We just cannot. The issue brought out by Sushant and also by Maruf here is the question of surprise. We cannot afford to have a strategic surprise again. It will not be acceptable to the nation, not be acceptable to the public. We have to get involved into Tibet to get the right information at the right time to know what's happening. And then we have the response mechanism. Then we can even pick up people from safer areas and bring them to bear. We don't have to put everybody across there. If there is a guaranteed manner of avoiding strategic surprise, then there is reaction, and then there is much more things possible that to be done here. If there is no, if the likelihood of being surprised, then we have to push more and more troops forward as possible, which is not the right way of doing things.
But isn't that also something that we need to, now, Maru, figure out and decide on? We can call it the element of surprise, or simply the fact that China is unpredictable like that, and they will do what they want, irrespective of what the understanding, what the protocol, what the norm may be. It doesn't matter to China anymore.
See, Tanvi, all the learned experts have brought out a lot of very important points. For me, it's also part of the learning curve. But let me bring out a couple of other issues. The first is, as Sushant also brought out, and I think General Bhatia mentioned that China respects that if you operate from a position of strength, you can't waffle around. You can't sort of play hide and seek with the Chinese anymore on the front lines. And offensive defense is a lot better than a reactive defense. I mean, military men will understand what I'm saying. The second aspect is that after the Chinese gave us the surprise, and I've often joked that our chaps were not just putting on masks to hide the COVID virus on their noses and mouths, but they were even hiding their eyes with masks. And that is why we got the surprise we got in April, May last year. But actually, it was an error of assessment. And the error of assessment happened because we are still stymied by the baggage of Nehru's legacy. And Nehru, Krishna Menon's legacy, and with other clowns that were there in South Block those days, like General B.G. Kaul and even General Palit, I'm afraid, they were all people who continued to sort of toe the line of blind leading blind. We now need to get real. We now need to understand that China will try and nibble every square yard it can lay its hands on, whether it is in Barahoti, whether it is in Nathula, whether it is way beyond even towards Walong. They will try and encroach, and when they get some resistance, they back off. And I've often said since the Indo-Chinese standoff last year that the lessons of Nathula and how General Sagat Singh gave them a real drubbing had put China on the back foot for 20 years. They went silent. And then General Sundarji again outsmarted them in Sumgurungchu. They again went silent. So the fact of the matter is that India has the capacity. Our education on matters related to our borders must be extended to the political leadership. We cannot be subservient to political leadership. That is not good civil-military relations. The job of the military is to spell out the situation to the political leadership and tell them, take a call. At least tomorrow there is some evidence and notings are made on the pad to say somebody spoke up. Now, you cannot ask somebody who's distracted with 10 other things to take a decision on matters of the borders simply because, matters of defense have to be handled by the civilian leadership at the end of the day. The civilian leadership needs to be guided. And I don't think that is always being done even now. So there's that one problem. The other problem is that we have done reorientation of our troops. There was a very Pakistan-centric deployment of the Indian Army. And let me tell you that this problem is largely a territorial problem. Yes, of course, the Air Force plays a very important role. The Navy can be put to play to put pressure on China on the high seas so that the pressure on the borders gets eased off. I mean, there is a strategy in place. Somebody has to give the go-ahead at some stage if work push comes to shove. But the fact of the matter is that the army cannot be Pak-centric anymore. It has now shifted and it has reoriented. Say one corps is looking as a strike corps in LAC area. Earlier, one corps' role was towards Pakistan. Likewise, there are other corps and divisions that need to be. Some have argued. One ex-chief called me up and said, I'm not in favor of strike corps. We should have more divisions broken out of strike corps to be given a strike role. Fine. That is the nitty-gritty which Army Headquarters and MO has to take care of. General Bhatia was DG MO. He knows what I'm talking about. The fact is, the bottom line is, you are not going to be looking at either of the problems in isolation.
Correct.
And this will keep increasing. September, October, November, see more infiltration attempts. Now that Pakistan is being eased off the burden of setting up a government in Kabul of their choice. The ISA chief was there. Their hand is now out in the open. Now they will try and think. And I attribute this to many illiterates on our media who keep talking about, oh, the Taliban's going to come into Kashmir. The fathers of the Taliban who created the Taliban, the Pakistan Army, haven't been able to get into Kashmir. Taliban kya aayega? And we just keep talking about, my God, India is now going to be taken hostage by the Taliban. There are a bunch of ragtag guerrillas faced with the regular army. They will be run away into smithereens. Where were they for 20 years doing nitpicking with the US Army? They only rolled in when the US Army vacated the space. So let's not over-attribute. Let's not get too scared. Let's get real. That is the bottom line. And
okay, let's get real. Yes.
And the odd bloody musketeer that has been caught just now in front of URI, there are hundreds of them that keep coming and keep getting shot dead.
The 19-year-old who got so scared, the 19-year-old Maruf who got so scared that he surrendered. He saw his, his companion who was supposed to be more experienced, senior, well-versed with what had to be done, shot dead. He saw they had been trapped there for a week. He had no way to go back, nothing else, and he surrendered. And he is now saying what really went on and what has to be said. But there is a larger point. And all of you are largely on the same page as far as the challenge is concerned on both the fronts. Now, what do we need to do to strengthen or to support the military at that level? And I'm going to specifically actually talk about the northern part first, General Bhatia. The terrain is so difficult. The vendor conditions are not conducive. If we are to say that we need much more soldiers through the year in the toughest of these places, China is just, going on full throttle building infrastructure and bringing in the biggest of their equipment, setting up permanent structures. What do we need to do? Are we actually moving at that pace?
Tanvi, thank you. It's been a very interesting discussion. Maruf was there and General Rakesh Sharma and Shamsareen. I think it's a very interesting discussion. What you really say is that we have to look north. It is not that we've not been looking at the northern adversary. We have been looking over the years. The thing has been, the focus has been on day-to-day things, the Western Front. But the strategic rebalancing has been going on over the years, and it's only taken a push right now because we face an imminent threat. We have been deployed along the line of actual control. We have a battle-hardened combat, which, especially in the high-altitude warfare army, we have the Air Force, which is up to it. So I don't think we can do, we really need to bother too much about China. But yes, if we do not build our capabilities and our capacities, we are in for trouble again. What we need to do is a very focused infrastructure push. Our infrastructure is fragile. It is fragile in the monsoons, fragile in the winters, and we need infrastructure. We need multiple access to our various sectors and subsectors and our areas, our zones. We need to integrate our people, which are integrated in Ladakh, in Eastern Belt. Let me show you. We wouldn't have survived out there without the support of the people of Ladakh, who willingly come and help out the army in the logistics and in taking the loads up. So we have to make sure that the people are integrated, the economic development which takes place in our areas. We should learn from China. China, while managing the LAC, follows what I call the China is the 3R philosophy. They got the roads, they got the radar, which is early warning, and they got the reserves. We lack roads, we lack our intelligence ISR capabilities, and we are creating reserves. We have a forward deployment, which is a very robust deployment, I must say, which is very good, and that is what has actually, though we had a strategic surprise, as Maruf put it, but we have faced up to the Chinese like no one else, and the Chinese had to withdraw for the first time in 1979 from Pangong. So the thing is that we cannot let this continue. We'll have to make sure that we give a very firm signal like we did in the Kailash range on 29-30th of last year. So China has to understand that it cannot bully us. It cannot do much what it wants to do. It is creating villages, which is a very short-term measure. And we need to replicate the villages out there. We need to put out there. But the Chinese villages out there will not be able to survive very much. That's my take. But people may think otherwise because they don't belong to that. We have scouts in place. We had raised our batch of scouts in 2012, 13, 14 when I was a DGMO. So we are doing things. but we need to keep at it and let us not, let's not be penny wise and pound foolish. We'll have to look at where the resources come from, and we'll have to look at both fronts equally. We cannot say our focus should be northern and we should, just see what happens in the western front. Pakistan can be used as a proxy of China, so that also has to be taken care of. We'll have to prepare all of it.
Well, I 100% agree with you that, and every time there is a report that comes out about how China is bringing in more infrastructure, building in permanent structures on their side of the LAC, I feel that, we need to also reiterate the fact that the same needs to be done on our side. I mean, our soldiers can brave whatever kind of conditions that you may want to put them in, but it is the responsibility of the authorities and the government and the establishment to ensure that we make it at least simpler and easier for them to stay in those conditions and to protect our borders. Very quickly, before I wrap this up, Sushant, to you, and to the point that you made earlier on the diplomatic front, let's just take an example of what has happened here. What China has done in the last couple of weeks itself, there have been several reports of transgressions, the biggest one being the Uttarakhand one. The government only official statement that has come out has been, Sushant, to say, oh, China keeps shifting goalposts and that isn't really conducive then when we are holding talks. Is that the right level and the right kind of response that we need to put out?
No, I think I won't nitpick on the response of the Indian ambassador in Beijing. It was a seminar and he said what needed to be said. But I think the message, even from the External Affairs Minister, has been pretty tough as far as the Chinese are concerned. And in fact, we've been telling the Chinese that, look, if you really, because the Chinese are telling us that, listen, forget about the border, let's talk about the other nice stuff. And we are saying, sorry, no go. In the past, we used to say that, okay, fine, let's talk about the other stuff and the border can wait. Now we are saying no way. And in fact, one credit which I will give to Mr. Modi is ever since he's come to power in 2014, he has been very keen to try and settle this border issue. Now, the thing is, this is very much on the table. So, and the Chinese now have pushed us into a point where we are not ready to take it off the table, and rightly so. So I think on that front, we are perfectly fine. The other thing is that the Chinese are also, like the Pakistanis, the Chinese are also, at least under this character, Jinping, they're also past masters in shooting themselves in the foot. The amount they have alienated the rest of the world makes our diplomacy so much easier. Imagine trying to do this kind of diplomacy 5, 7, 10 years back. It was not possible. Today, it is so easy to do it. Similarly with the Pakistanis, I agree that this guy we've caught is cannon fodder. But look, Tanvi, all my other colleagues on your show will agree that there is a very important thing in international diplomacy called lawfare. That you build up your case, you build it up compellingly, you take that case to the rest of the world. It does not mean that everybody is going to come like a ton of bricks on the Pakistanis. No. But you keep badgering on it, you keep on and on and on, and somewhere along the line, the penny drops and things start working in your way. Our problem is that when we do it for a couple of years, then suddenly we say, it doesn't seem to be working out. Little realizing that the amount of noise we made with the Pakistanis right from the time of the Khalistan movement to Kashmir and continuing right now created an international environment in which Pakistan was seen as a terror sponsoring country. Mm-hmm. So I think our lawfare was fairly effective. We need to scale it up much more. We need to use our soft power much more and much more effectively, not just on our Western front, but also on our Eastern front. Yeah. All that goodwill which we earn, I think we need to start using it in a strategic sense so that it starts paying us real economic and political and diplomatic dividends, also strategic dividends. I think we need to start doing that. And I think we have been a little lax on that front, but we need to push ahead with it, not neglect it, because that's a very important part of international diplomacy.
Okay, I must say it's been an extremely enlightening conversation for me. It's always great to have Maruf and Sushant, and thank you to General Bhatia and General Sharma for also joining us on this special conversation and sharing your insights. So there you go, viewers. Our experts are really telling you this is a challenge where we need to do a lot more. step up diplomatically, militarily, acknowledge and now implement a strategy which is to deal with the challenge on two fronts, Pakistani front and China front. Deal with them differently. These are two different, very different beasts with very different strategies. It's not about whether we have the capabilities or not. It's about how quickly are we able to move and upgrade our strategy and implement it on ground to take on these two challenges. Otherwise, you'll keep seeing instances like what has happened in Uttarakhand. We may have captured one Pakistani terrorist to show to the world that this is what Pakistan does. But we know from past experiences that that doesn't really change anything. Nobody in the world, none of the other countries are going to pressurize Pakistan into changing their strategy. Their entire existence gets defined by pushing terrorism into India and by convincing their own people that it's India which is the villain and it is their people who need to stand up to this. Similarly for China, like our experts are pointing out, when there is an internal big political crisis, the answer often is what you can do militarily to assert your power across the world and make your own people happy. And that's what China is resorting to again and again in a more and more brazen manner. Our government and our forces need to be on their toes, wide alert, and constantly changing their strategies. Thank you so much for joining us.